بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. So there's dates in the Islamic calendar that are always important to consider. For example, Muharram is a special date, Dhul Hijjah is a special date, Ramadan is a special date. These are special dates that we have. But also beyond that, not just from the Islamic calendar, but also in Islamic history, there are always dates that are relevant to us. This is important to understand. So we live and we understand two things at the same time. One is the Islamic dates that are relevant to us, that the Prophet ﷺ taught us. And there is also then Islamic dates of the Muslim community that are relevant to us. For example, I think as an example, Malcolm X, learning about his history is a very important thing for Muslims and believers, right? Certain individuals in our history to look at their lives. One of them is the Nakba. The Nakba is an event that took place 77 years ago, exactly yesterday. So yesterday, 77 years ago, the Nakba took place. So let's talk about the history of the Nakba, and it includes obviously Palestine. So more than 100 years ago, World War I takes place. During World War I, the Ottoman Empire was allies with Germany and they were defeated. Not World War II, World War I. And the empire was dismantled. The Ottoman Empire was dismantled, and the French and the British, they took a lot of what the Ottoman Empire owned. So that includes Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, a lot of the Levant. So simple, World War I takes place, World War I, the Ottoman Empire loses, and at that dismantling of the Ottoman Empire, it's then much of that Muslim land is distributed to the British and the French. Now, in 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary at the time, his name was Arthur Balfour. So he writes a letter addressed to the main man of the British Jewish community. It's a short letter, just 67 words. And what the British Foreign Secretary had committed, and I'll quote from the letter directly, the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. So this is known as the Balfour Declaration. Right? This is what's known as the Balfour Declaration, where in 1917, the British Foreign Secretary hands over or sends a letter to this the main man, he was actually Arthur Rothschild, and he sends him a letter saying, we're going to give you Palestine as a land for the Jewish people. Why was this controversial? Well, reason number one, the Balfour Declaration is made by an English foreigner who has no claim to Palestinian people and Palestine, and it's handed over to a foreign Jew who has no right to this land. And so the native Palestinians, who are the majority resident, they had zero say in the matter. That's the first reason it was problematic, of course. The second reason is the Balfour Declaration was one of three conflicting promises made by the British. This is important, many people don't know this part. So in World War I, Britain had already promised the Arabs that we will give you an independent Arab state, which includes Palestine, if you help us fight against the Ottoman Turks. That is known as the 1915 Hussein-McMahon correspondence. Hussein was on one side, McMahon was on the other side. So already behind the scenes, the Arabs have somewhat backstabbed the Ottoman Empire so that they can get their hands on this piece of land. As if two deals on the table on the same piece of land wasn't enough, the British had made one deal to the Jewish community, they had made one deal to the Arabs, but the British also promised the French in a separate treaty known as the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement that the majority of Palestine would be under international administration, while the rest of the region, the rest of the Arab states will be split between the two colonial powers, between France and between England. But Palestine would stay under international administration. So now you've got this in mind as well. The British have set three deals on the table. To the Arabs, we'll promise them Palestine, they'll help us. We'll say to the French, we'll give you all of these Arab states as well, they'll help us. There's lots of minerals, there's lots to be gained from this land. And then we'll also promise this to the Jewish community. Now, you might ask, we understand why the deal was made with the Arabs. It's in support against the Ottomans. We understand why the deal was made with the French. It's going to be supporting us as allies. But why was the deal made with the Jewish community? So that's the next question. Why is the British government so eager to offer the Jewish community land? Well, we generally think Europe has lessons to offer me and you. The entirety of Europe has always had an immense hatred for the Jewish community. Look across history, and I'm now going to mention some statistics here. Jews were expelled from England, from Wales, from France, from Germany, from Spain, from Lithuania, from Portugal, from Italy, from Hungary, from Austria. All of these places Jews were expelled from. Where did they find safety? Where did they find refuge? In Muslim lands. They moved to Al-Maghrib, they moved to Tunis, they moved to Egypt, they moved to the Ottoman Empire, they took them in. If anti-Semitism has been found anywhere, it was found in Europe. In the 1900s, the Jewish community populated two key areas. This is important to understand. They were living in the east, so that's in and around Russia and those in Europe. So that's in Russia, and then that's in the Eastern world, and then there were those who were in Europe. So these are the two places you've got the Jewish community living. Now, in the Eastern world, where Russia, etc., pogroms were taking place. Pogroms are where Jews were being targeted, and the Jews in the East were having to flee. Where were they leaving to? They were coming to Europe. And so what happens is the British decide to look for a solution to the Jewish problem, as they call it. That's not terminology that's used by the Muslim world, by the way. That's the Western values. They say the Jewish problem. How do we deal with the Jewish problem coming in? That's a Western thing. That's nothing to do with Muslims. So they say we need a solution. So what did they propose? In 1903, England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews. Again, these are all statistics that you can easily find and data you can find. So they said the first solution is, we'll put it in Uganda. We'll put the Jewish community in Uganda. We'll take 6,000 square miles. That fell through. It didn't work out. And so England wanted to rid themselves, as they call it, of the Jewish refugees. And so they decided on Palestine. Many of the rabbis of the Jewish community opposed this move to Palestine. The segment of Jews who pushed for the move to Palestine, they were known as Zionists. They firmly believed in a homeland for the Jews, and they were making every effort to establish it in Palestine. Now, you need to understand, the mainstream and the Orthodox Jews of the time, the normal legitimate Jews, they rejected this idea so much that they would even mock Zionism. They would deem it as theological hearsay. They would do takfir of them. So normal Jews would do takfir. They'd say these are not Jews. They're kafir, as we would call it. They're non-Gentile. They're nothing to do with us, because of the idea that this was not legitimate. So what happens next? Okay, we've seen the agreement that was made on the tables. Between 1923 and 1948, the British facilitated mass Jewish immigration. Think about the dates, very important, 1923, 1948. We are Muslims who live in Britain, we should know what's happening around these dates. Around this time, most residents are fleeing Hitler and the Nazi movement towards England and other such countries. And the British government wants to find a nice way of expelling the Jewish influx. They're all leaving Germany, they're coming to the UK, Britain. This is an immigration issue. How do we deal with this? And of course, just imagine for the Palestinians, this is madness. The British are confiscating our land and handing it over to Jewish settlers. So the British are directly involved between 1923 and 1948. But in 1936, tensions are escalating, and it leads to the Arab Revolt. You've all heard of the Arab Revolt, 1936 to 1939. Palestinians have had enough. They launched a general strike for 6 months. So they withheld tax payments, they boycotted Jewish products, and they were protesting British colonialism and the growing Jewish immigration. Understandably, what else are you going to do? You're going to express this is not something that should be happening. The strike was brutally repressed by the British. They launched a mass arrest campaign, carried out home demolitions, a practice that Israel continues to implement against Palestinians today. The second phase of the revolt began in the late 1937 and was led by the Palestinians, and they targeted British forces and colonialism. Now, by the end of 1939, Britain had amassed 30,000 troops in Palestine. We've seen it in Iraq, we've seen it in Afghanistan, we've seen it in Syria, we've seen it in all of these scenarios where the British, for some reason, feels the need to come into foreign lands. And then when these foreign lands migrate to the UK, they're like, well, what's going on here? Why is there so many migrations? Why is there so many people migrating here? It's the chickens coming home to roost. You made a problem there, now they're going to come here. And so 30,000 troops are sat in Palestine. Villages are bombed by air, curfews are imposed. Imagine saying a foreign power comes and says to you, by the way, past 8 o'clock p.m. you can't leave your houses. Who are you to tell us what we can do in our land and what we can't do in our land? Homes were demolished, administrative detentions took place, summary killings were widespread. In the 3 years of revolt, 5,000 Palestinians were killed, 15 to 20,000 were wounded, and 5,600 were imprisoned. So 1920 to 1946, almost 400,000 Jewish immigrants, mostly from Europe, arrive in Palestine according to British records. Not according to British records. That's the data that I found. Now in the mid-1940s, the British government starts panicking. They're worried about the eruption of violence between the Palestinians and the Zionists. Remember, the Jewish community is not really moving yet. It's really the Zionist community. And so now the Brits are panicking, so they try to slow down the immigration of European Jews. And they kind of say, okay, we've done enough now. In 1944, a bunch of Zionist armed groups declared war on Britain for trying to put limits on Jewish immigration to Palestine at a time when Jews were fleeing the Holocaust. We know the World War II, 1945 ended. 1944 is when this took place. And so the Zionist paramilitary organizations who were trained by the British, they launched a number of attacks against the British. The most notable of which was there was a King David hotel that was in the region. It was bombed, and therein, in 1946, and that was the British administrative headquarters. 91 people were killed in the attack. So the British trained the Zionist entity. The British now said, we're not going to send Jews anymore. And so now the Zionist entity says, okay, we'll bomb your buildings. And so they bombed the British buildings, an act of terror that was conducted, and saying, if you're not with us, you're against us. In 1947, the British government is really panicking. And they've announced that, you know what, we've made a mistake here. This is a big issue. Palestine, the Palestinians have an issue, the Zionists have an issue. We shouldn't have got involved. Of course, they shouldn't have got involved. But now they're panicking and they announce, you know, we're going to hand this issue over to the United Nations. We'll give it to the UN and we'll let the UN deal with it. That's an absolute demonstration of incompetence from the British. And so in 1947 now, listen to the statistics, 33% of Palestine is now Jewish. But the Jewish community only own 6% of the land. So 6% of the land is now Jewish. And 33% of the population is the Jewish community. So the UN turns up, the United Nations. They are an organization who claims to maintain international peace and uphold international law. Over the last 2 years, we've realized it's an absolute farce. It's not able to do much in the realm of international law. And so they proposed that, okay, look, we're going to find a solution. So they proposed to randomly and arbitrarily carve up Palestinian land and hand it over to the Jewish community. And they produced Jewish states. How much did the Palestinians own right now? 94% of the land. How much were the Palestinians given after the UN gave the partition? 42% of the land. They gave the majority of the land to the Jewish state. 55% was given to the Jewish community, even though Palestinians were the majority population. Now, you might be wondering, 55% plus 42% doesn't equal 100%. There's 3% left. Jerusalem remained under international control, that 3%. So the Jews were handed a bunch of land that was encompassing many of the main cities, where the Palestinian Arabs were a majority. Not only that, one thing is if you split the land equally, but it also depends which land you're giving. What if you're giving all the agricultural land to one side and you're giving the rest of the not useful land to another side? And so if you take a look, the Palestinian Arabs, despite being the majority, the Jews were given the coastline from Haifa to Jaffa. The Arab state would be deprived of the key agricultural lands, they were deprived of seaports, and that led to Palestinians rejecting the proposal. Of course they would reject this proposal. You can't come in as the United Nations, say we're going to find a solution, and the solution is, we'll take a bit more of your land. It's like somebody's living in your garden, and then the police come and say, we'll find a good solution for you. Give them your front yard as well, and give them the front part of your house, your kind of, your sitting room, and we'll give the rest to you. That's a good split. It doesn't work like that. What happens next? And this is what I'm going to conclude on. I've got the history up until today, and I will share that with you, inshallah. I'll tell you how to access it. But what happens next? The next thing is what I want to discuss today, the brutal Nakba of 1948. And that's why I said to you, that the Nakba took place on the 14th of May, which was yesterday. Yesterday was the 14th of May. Yesterday? Thursday. 2 days ago, 15th of May. 15th of May is the day it's remembered, 14th of May is when it took place. Because 15th of May is when the Zionist entity kind of established their independence. What does Nakba mean in Arabic? Nakba means the catastrophic event. This terrible, terrible event, which was the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, the destruction of the Palestinian homeland and their society. So, the Zionist movement says, well, Britain is no longer involved, Britain's gone. The UN, they've given us a big bunch of land, the UN is no longer involved. So now we're going to get things our way. By the first half of 1949, at least 750,000 Palestinians in total were forcibly expelled or fled outside of their homeland. So as soon as the British have gone, and the British have trained this Zionist paramilitary, they've armed the Zionist paramilitary, they left all the weapons there, left the country, now they say, now we'll do things our way. 750,000 Palestinians displaced within that first year. They were forced to leave their homes. As if that wasn't enough, the Zionist forces killed thousands of Palestinians. They massacred the Palestinians. Attacks such as bombings of homes, looting, the destruction of property and entire villages. You know, when you look back in history, when I studied this a couple of years ago, I would ask myself, where were the Muslims during the Nakba? Where were we during the Nakba? Guess what? Something worse than the Nakba is happening right now. You know the difference between the Nakba of the 1948 and the Nakba of 2025? The difference is we're seeing it in front of our eyes. That's the difference. We didn't see that. Right now we're seeing this. The point I'm going to say here is, what have I done and what am I doing? These aren't just very nice little platitudes. This isn't me sitting here to get a nice lecture or to say something which is cool, we all walk out, it's all good. This is really for me to ask myself, in the last 2 years, what have I really done? What have I genuinely done? What actions have I taken? Have I educated myself? Do I know anything of the history? Am I speaking about it to my children? Am I just saying, oh yeah, Palestine, it's such a shame, yeah, this, that. Have I gone to visit Palestine? Have I gone and booked a flight? I've been, alhamdulillah, to Palestine with groups in the last 3 years, in the last 2 years, since October 7th, in the last 2 years, 3 times. Easily, very easily possible to go. There's no difficulty getting into Jerusalem. There's no difficulty getting into Aqsa. How much have I educated myself? How much have I looked into boycotts? Do boycotts work? Have I looked into that? What are the benefits of that? Have I spoken to real scholars on this matter? Have I interacted with people and asked about the fiqh of these things? That what's the point of boycotting? What's the benefit of boycotting? These things that people are talking about. You know, we always have this idea, but you know, I'm one person. What difference will I make? What difference will I make if I boycott, if I don't boycott? Let me explain to you something very simple. When that money is being used, and it's being sent, and it's being used to build one bullet, I cannot be a part of that. I cannot be a part of somebody who acknowledges that. Even if it doesn't make a difference, I will stand in front of Allah and look. Imagine the Prophet said that. You know, there's a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet ﷺ says that a prophet will come on the day of judgment. You know how many followers this prophet will have? 0. He spent his whole life giving da'wah and he wasn't able to bring one person. Hadith of Bukhari. Do we call this person a failure? Do we say that this prophet didn't achieve their mission? You gave da'wah, you did your effort. Whether a person comes to Allah, whether a person doesn't, you made your effort. As-sa'yu minna wal itmamu min Allah. The effort is from us, the results are from Allah. You're saying, what's the benefit of all of this? I can mention to you tens of benefits right now. Ask me the number of people that have accepted Islam because of the Palestinian cause. They come and they say, I've been looking at the Palestinians and I'm shocked to see how they still thank Allah in the situations they have. Right now they're starving. They've not had food entering into the compounds for 60 days. If you take a look at the pictures of the children, they're absolutely dying. What am I doing for this Palestinian cause? What can I do? Inshallah, if you go onto zidna.co.uk website, zidna.co.uk/protest, I have put together a series of fatwa and responses and answers to questions people have. Are we permitted to attend protests? What about the intermingling of genders? What about the music that takes place? What is the objective of attending a protest? What are the benefits of attending a protest? From the Islamic perspective, is it permissible or not? If you go on zidna.co.uk/protest, inshallah it'll be shared from the WhatsApp group of Streatham Mosque. If you're not on the WhatsApp group on the Streatham Mosque, join that. Secondly, I will also share a nice simple timeline of the history of the Palestine, what I've been mentioning to you, zidna.co.uk/Palestine. You can access this. There is a march tomorrow. People will be going. Try and attend that. Try and go with the right intentions. And again, there's principles to these things. You don't go, you control your eyes, you control yourself, you do the dhikr of Allah, you remember Allah, and you stand, etc. All of the details you'll find in those responses that have been provided. But again, beyond that protest, it doesn't end. Ask yourself what you can do. Ask yourself what you should be doing. Ask yourself that fikr for the ummah, that concern for the ummah, what can I do? May Allah give me and you the ability. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.